The restaurant was the nicest one Adam Sorrell had ever set foot in, and he had been saving for 4 months to walk his daughter through its doors. He noticed everything, the way a man notices a place he does not belong. The white cloths that fell all the way to the floor, the little candle in amber glass at each table, the waiters who moved without seeming to hurry. He had put on the one jacket he owned that did not smell of sawdust, and he had ironed Bertie's blue dress himself the night before, standing at the board past midnight, because she wanted to look like a lady on her birthday, and because she was 8 now, and 8 only happened once. They sat at a small table near the kitchen door, the one nobody wants, and Adam did not mind it. Through the round window in the swinging door he could see the flames, the copper pans, the quick, clean choreography of it, and he pointed it out to her, and her eyes went wide. She unfolded the drawing she had made him, the 2 of them as stick figures under a lopsided sun, and set it against the candle glass like it belonged in a museum. "Best table in the house," Adam told her, and he meant it. He watched her order like a grown woman, careful and serious, and he ordered the least expensive thing on the menu and said he was not very hungry, which was a small lie a father is allowed. When the check came, he did the arithmetic he had already done 100 times in his head that week. He counted the bills under the edge of the table, slow, and he left every single one he could spare. And it was not much, because there was almost nothing left in him to spare. What he set down was the truth of the whole month, folded small. That was when the woman at the big table by the window laughed. She was beautiful in the expensive way, in a dress the color of deep water, at the center of a table of men in good suits who laughed when she laughed. She had been watching him count, he realized. She had been watching the whole time. "Is that his whole tip?" she said, and she did not lower her voice. She let it carry, the way you let a thing carry when you want a room to enjoy it with you. Some people really shouldn't come somewhere like this. The young server who had taken care of them all night went red to her collar. Heads turned at the near tables, then turned away, the way heads do. Adam felt the old heat climb the back of his neck. He had a dozen true things he could have said, and every one of them would have cost him something he was not willing to spend, so he said none of them. He stood. He helped Bertie into her coat, the small arms finding the sleeves. He looked at the server, whose name tag said Nina, and he made his voice as steady and kind as he could make it. "Thank you, Nina," he said. "It was the best night. You take care." And he took his daughter's hand and walked her out into the cold spring dark, and behind the glass the woman in the watercolored dress was still smiling, pleased with herself, having no idea in the world what that small tip had cost the man who left it. Before you go on, understand something, because it matters for everything that follows. The woman, laughing at that tip, owed this man more than she could ever imagine, and she was 3 months from finding out. Some debts arrive from a direction you never watch. To understand that table, you have to see another one first, 3 months earlier, on the worst night of a stranger's life. It had been 2 a.m. in a hospital on the north side of the city, and the corridor had that particular hum that hospitals have when the world is asleep, and someone in it is not going to make it to breakfast without help. Adam had been there for a burst pipe. That was the plain truth of how it started. He fixed things for a living, 1 man in 1 van, and the hospital's facilities office kept his number for the jobs the big contractors would not come out for at odd hours. He had shut off the water to a flooded supply room, and was coiling his hose in the hall when he passed the little office with the lights still on, and the woman inside it looked like she had been crying without letting herself. Her name was Opal Rennick. She had taught school for 31 years and then, when she could not stand retirement, had come to run the hospital's patient assistance office, which is a gentle name for the desk where people come apart. Adam knew her a little, the way you know the people who are awake at the same bad hours you are. Long night, he said. They are all long lately, she said. And then, because it was 2 a.m. and he was the only warm thing in the hall, she told him. There was a woman on the 4th floor, 66 years old, who needed a valve repaired in her heart, and the surgery had been scheduled and then denied, some coding argument, some word like pre-authorization, and the appeal would take weeks the woman's heart did not have. Her family was scrambling. They would not make it in time. Opal had made these calls 1,000 times, and she still could not make herself numb to them. Adam stood in the doorway a long moment. He knew the shape of this exactly. He had lived inside it. He knew what a delay costs when it wears the mask of a form. "How much?" he said. Opal looked up at him. She knew what he drove and what he wore. "More than you have," she said, not unkindly. "How much?" She told him. It was a number that had taken him 3 years to save, in the coffee can way that people without much save, a little at a time, off the top, before the month could get to it. He had been saving it toward the last of his late wife's medical debt, and toward a cushion, and toward the vague hope that a man with a child ought to have some floor under him. He thought about the floor. He thought about Susie in a bed like the one upstairs, and the treatment that had been out of network until it was too late, and the way money had stood in the doorway of their last good year like a man who would not move. "Do it in my wife's name," he said. "But don't put her name, just the initials, and don't put mine at all. She can never know it was a person. Tell her it was a fund, tell her it was luck. Just get her into that room." Opal Rennick had run that desk for 6 years, and she did not cry in front of people, and she came very close. "You understand, this is nearly everything," she said. "It's exactly what it's for," Adam said. "It's the only thing I've ever been sure of." He signed where she showed him. On the line where a donor's name goes, she wrote 2 letters, S and S, and nothing else, and Adam picked up his hose and finished coiling it, and drove home through the empty streets to relieve the neighbor who sat with Bertie on his night jobs, and he never went back to the 4th floor to see whose life he had bought. It did not occur to him that he was owed a look. He had not done it to be owed anything. He told Bertie in the morning only that he had helped someone at the hospital, which was true, and she asked if the someone was going to be okay, and he said he hoped so, very much, and she nodded and went back to her drawing, satisfied, because in her world helping a person was simply what her father did, as ordinary and constant as the light through the kitchen window. He did not tell her the number. He did not tell anyone the number. The number was a thing between him and a coffee can and a promise made at a graveside, and it was nobody else's in the world to weigh. Now, hold that in your mind as we go, because it is the whole thing. A man who gave away the last of his floor to keep a stranger standing, and a stranger who would spend 3 months trying to find him. Guess which table they would share first. I promise you will not guess how. You would understand Adam better if you saw his ordinary mornings, which is where the truth of a man actually lives. He woke before the alarm out of habit. The house was small and rented, and had been Susie's before it was theirs. A narrow place with a porch step that creaked, and a kitchen that got the good early light. Bertie's drawings covered the refrigerator in an overlapping quilt, and he had never taken a single one down. He made her lunch the night before so the mornings could be soft, and there was a standing rule that Tuesdays were pancake mornings, and the pancakes were shaped like nothing on earth. Blobs he swore were a dog, a boat, a hat, while she laughed and corrected him. He still wore his wedding band. He was not waiting for anyone, and he was not performing his grief. He simply had not found the day it made sense to take it off, and he had stopped looking for that day a while ago. His work was the kind that does not make a man rich and does make him necessary. He fixed the things people had given up on. That week, it was Mrs. Okafor's grab bars, loose in the plaster by her tub, and he reset them into the studs and added a second rail she had not asked for, because he had watched her steady herself against the towel rod and it had scared him. When he was done, she pressed a folded bill into his hand and he pressed it right back. "You never charge me what it's worth," she said. "You keep the cookies coming, we're square," he told her, and he carried her trash cans to the curb on his way out because it was bin day and her hip was bad. He kept a worn spiral notebook in the van of the hours he never billed, not out of pride, only because he liked to know the true shape of a week. And the true shape of his weeks was that he gave more away than he charged for. He did not think of this as generosity. He thought of it as arithmetic that came out the way it came out. On the good weeks, he took Bertie along to the job sites that were safe for a child, and she wore a little tool belt he had made her from an old one cut down, and she handed him the wrong tools with total confidence while he thanked her gravely for each one. She was learning, without either of them ever calling it a lesson, that work was a way of loving people you would never meet, that a rail set true might catch a woman who lived alone, that the whole point of being good at a thing was the people it kept standing. He never once said any of that out loud to her. He just let her watch, and children learn the truest things by watching. The reason he could carry it was Bertie, and the reason he could carry it was Susie. And those two facts were braided so tightly he could not have told you where one ended. He had met Susie at a hardware counter more than 15 years earlier, when she was buying the wrong paint for a job and would not be told, and he had liked that about her instantly and never stopped. They had married young. They had waited a while for Bertie and gotten her at last, and the three of them had been almost unfairly happy for a handful of years, in the narrow house with the good light. Then Susie got sick. And the sickness was one thing, an enemy you could at least name, but the delay was another. There had been a treatment. There had been a plan that called it out of network, a phrase that sounds like nothing until it is standing between you and the person you love with all the time in the world running out behind it. By the time the argument was won, the window had closed. They did not lose her only to the disease. They lost her in part to a weight that had a price tag. After the funeral, the bills kept coming in her name for a long time, as if the machine had not been told she was gone. Adam paid them slowly, month over month, and somewhere in that first hard year he made himself a promise that he did not say out loud to anyone. If he ever had the means, no other family was going to lose somebody to a waiting room and a denied form. Not if he could stand in that doorway himself and refuse to move. So when Opal Rennick told him about a stranger on the 4th floor, there had never really been a choice in it. The choice had been made 3 years before, at a graveside, by a younger and more broken version of the same man. What the gift did to him in the plain daylight of that spring was leave him thin. He had given away the cushion and the floor both, and money in a life like his does not forgive an empty month. The letter came on a Tuesday, after the pancakes, in an envelope that tried to look like it was from a court. It was from a company called Meridian Recovery, and it said in the flat language those letters use that they had purchased a debt, that the debt was his, that it was far larger than any number he recognized, and that the house could be attached to satisfy it. The debt was Susie's old paper, the medical bills, bought for pennies by a company that traded in the last hard days of dead people, and then dressed the number up to 3 times its size. He called them that night after Bertie was asleep, and he kept his voice low and even because the walls were thin. "I'm not disputing that I owe something," he said. "I'm disputing that number. That is not what we borrowed. That is not close to what we borrowed." The voice on the other end was bored and scripted, and told him he could settle today for a figure that was still a robbery, or they could proceed. He said he would not settle a number that was invented. The voice said, "Suit yourself," and hung up. And Adam sat at the kitchen table for a long time under the one light, with the letter face up and the reservation confirmation for Bertie's birthday dinner sitting right beside it, the good thing and the bad thing on the same square of wood. He turned the letter face down. He decided that his daughter was going to get her one nice night if it was the last dollar he had, because a bad month was not going to be allowed to reach an 8-year-old on her birthday. Some men would call that foolish. Adam called it the only part of the whole business he could still control. Which is how a thin man in an ironed jacket came to be sitting at a small table near the kitchen door, counting out the last soft bills he had, on the night a rich stranger decided to make sport of him. You have already seen that table. Now you know what he was carrying to it. He could have answered her. That is the thing to understand about the moment. He had, sitting right there in his chest, the single most humiliating fact he could have handed her, which was also the most magnificent, and it would have wiped that smile off her face in front of every man at her table. He could have said, "The reason this tip is small is that I gave away everything I had to keep a stranger alive, and I would do it again tonight." It was true, it was armor, and he did not put it on, because the moment he spent it to win a fight in a restaurant, it would stop being the thing it was and start being a thing he did for applause, and he had promised a dead woman it would never be that. So he thanked Nina by name, and he took his daughter's hand, and he carried the whole enormous, silent truth of himself out the door and into the cold, and he let a room full of strangers count his tip and find it small. The woman in the watercolored dress was named Cora Halstead, and by every measure the world uses, she was a success. She ran a hospitality company that was the toast of the city, restaurants and hotels with her taste stamped on all of them, and she'd built it hard and fast and mostly alone, and she had gotten very good at deciding in a glance who mattered in a room and who did not. That night at the window table, she had decided about the man near the kitchen the way she decided about everything, quickly, and she had been wrong in a way she did not yet know how to measure. It should have slid off her by morning. It did not. She kept seeing the way he had thanked the girl. She kept seeing the little drawing propped against the candle. She had expected the man to snap back at her, or to shrink, and instead he had simply gathered his child and gone, with a dignity that made her own cleverness feel cheap in her mouth for reasons she could not name. Here is where you get to decide what kind of story you think this is, so keep your answer. Cora Halstead did something that week that people like her almost never do. She went looking for a man she had wronged, not to be forgiven, she told herself, but to make it square, to send the girl a proper gift, to close the small, ugly loop and feel clean again. Guess what she found instead? I will tell you she was not ready for it, and neither was anyone else. It started, as these things do, with her mother. Cora's mother, Marguerite, was home now and healing, 3 months out from the surgery that had nearly not happened, the one the family did not talk about the near miss of because the near miss was too frightening to hold. Marguerite had spent those 3 months quietly obsessed with a single question, which was, who had paid? The hospital would only tell her it had been an anonymous gift through the assistant's office. Marguerite, who had spent her life sending thank-you notes for far smaller things, could not abide a kindness she could not answer, and she brought it up again the afternoon Cora came to sit with her. I keep thinking about him, Marguerite said, or her, whoever it was. Mom, you'll make yourself sick chasing it. I would just like to say thank you to a human being, Marguerite said. Is that so much? She smiled. Tell me something to take my mind off it. Tell me about your week. So Cora, half laughing at herself, told her about the restaurant, about the cheap man near the kitchen who left the embarrassing tip, and how she had put him in his place, expecting her mother to laugh along the way her table had. Marguerite did not laugh. Something moved across her face and settled and went very still. "Describe him," she said. "Mom." "Describe him to me, Cora." "I don't know. Ordinary. A working man. He had his little girl with him. She'd made him a drawing." Cora shrugged. "He wore a wedding ring, but there was no wife, just the two of them." "Why?" Marguerite's hand had gone to her chest, over the place where the scar was still healing. "A wedding ring and no wife," she said quietly. "A daughter, about 8. She looked at her own daughter. "Cora. The nurse who admitted me said the person who paid asked them to put his late wife's initials on the form. 2 letters. He would not leave a name. A man who gives away everything and asks for nothing does not leave much of a trail, but he leaves that." Cora did not understand yet, not fully, but the floor of the afternoon had tilted, and she felt it. She went to the hospital the next morning and found Opal Rennick's office, and she used her mother's name and her mother's file to ask the question directly. And Opal, who guarded the anonymity of her donors like a priest guards a confession, looked at this polished, frightened woman for a while before she decided how much the truth was owed. "I can't give you his name," Opal said. "I gave him my word. He was very clear that no one was ever to know it was a person." "Please," Cora said, and it was not a word she used often, and it came out cracked. "I think I did something. I think I did something terrible without knowing." Opal folded her hands. "I will tell you what I can tell you, because I think you need to carry it. He came in on a night he was here fixing a broken pipe in his work clothes. He heard about a woman who was going to die over a form, and he gave nearly everything he had in the world to a stranger he never met. He asked me to record it under his late wife's initials. He never once came back to see whose life it bought. He didn't want the thanks. He didn't want to be in the room." She paused. "I have done this work a long time. I have almost never met his equal." "His wife's initials," Cora said. "What were they?" Opal hesitated one last time, and then decided that 2 letters were not a name. "SS," she said. And Cora Halstead sat down very slowly in the hard chair in that corridor, because a drawing propped against a candle had just rearranged itself in her memory into something she could not bear, and she understood all at once and far too late exactly whose tip she had counted and exactly what it had cost him. You decided a moment ago what kind of story this was. Hold your answer up against this next part, because a cruelty this neat is not always an accident. Sometimes a person builds it. Cora believed it was chance at first, and then she started pulling the thread. And the thread did not lead where chance leads. She began with the simplest wrong thing, which was her mother's denied surgery, and she asked a question she had never thought to ask, which was why. Her company carried a medical relief fund for its people and their families, a fund her own father had set up before he died, and Marguerite should have been covered by it in full, automatically, without a stranger ever being needed. Cora pulled the fund's statements herself, at night, in her own office, and the numbers did not sit right. The money had been moved. Quietly, over the better part of a year, reallocated out of the relief fund into an operating account, and then out again through a vendor she did not recognize, in amounts small enough to slide past a glance and large enough to matter. The reallocations carried the electronic sign-off of a junior clerk named Rhonda Serrano, but the pattern above them, the architecture of it, had one author. And Cora knew his hand the way you know the handwriting of someone who has sat across a boardroom table from you for 6 years. Byron Teal, her chief financial officer. The steady, unshowy man she had trusted with the arithmetic of everything she had built. Rhonda came to see her before Cora even called for her, which told Cora most of what she needed to know about who Rhonda actually was. The clerk stood in the doorway of the big office with her hands knotted together and her face gray. I need to tell you something, and I need you to let me finish before you fire me, Rhonda said. And then it came out of her in a rush. Teal had told her to move the fund money, said it was a temporary reallocation, said the fund was a sleepy line nobody read, said it would be back before anyone noticed. When she had balked, he had reminded her gently, the way careful men are cruel, that her mother was in a memory care home the job paid for, and that jobs were not guaranteed. I signed it, Rhonda said, and she was crying now. I knew, and I signed it anyway because I was scared, and a woman almost died, and I am so sorry. Cora looked at this frightened woman who had done a wrong thing out of fear, and then walked into the Lion's office to confess it, and she thought about a man in an ironed jacket who had done a magnificent thing out of love and walked away without a word, and she thought about herself, who had done a cruel thing out of nothing at all, out of sport, and she found she had run entirely out of the right to judge anybody. "You're not fired," Cora said. "You're going to help me end this. And then you're going to keep your job and your mother's bed, and we are never going to speak of the reason you were afraid again, except to make sure no one at this company is ever that afraid again." The rest of it moved the way these things move when the evidence is real, and the person holding it has finally decided to stop being liked and start being right. There was a shell company, and the shell company owned other things, and one of the things it owned, when Cora followed it all the way down at 3 a.m, with a cold cup of coffee going colder, was a debt-buying outfit called Meridian Recovery. The same Meridian that had bought a dead woman's medical paper for pennies and dressed it up to 3 times its size and mailed a threat to a narrow rented house with Good Morning Light. Teal had not only starved the fund that should have saved Marguerite, forcing a stranger to step into the gap. That same stranger's home was being taken by another arm of the same man's greed. The cruelty had a single author, and he had been signing Cora's checks. She did not confront him in the hallway. She did it in the room where it counted. The board met on a gray Thursday, and Opal Rennick came, invited, with a folder, and Rhonda came, and the fund's true statements were laid on the long table beside the ownership chain of the shell company, beside the paper trail of Meridian Recovery, and it was all as plain as a thing can be when a careful man has spent a year being careful in a straight line. Teal tried the smooth version first, and then the wounded version, and then, at the end, the ugly version, and none of them found any air in that room. "The vote is 7-1, the chair said when it came to it. "Mr. Teal, your access is revoked as of this moment. Security is waiting outside the door." He went the way those men go, which is to say without dignity and without a single word anyone would ever repeat, and the door closed behind him, and the room, honestly, forgot him within the hour, because there was so much better work to do. The relief fund was made whole, and then some. Rhonda Serrano kept her job and her mother's bed, and, within the year, ran the very fund she had been forced to loot, on the theory that no one guards a thing more fiercely than the person who once helped harm it. And a fraudulent debt held by a company that no longer had a reason to exist was voided in a single afternoon, and a narrow house with good light stopped, quietly, being in danger, and the man who lived in it did not yet know why. Word of the fund's restoration moved through the company in the low way good news moves, and a strange thing followed, which was that people who had never once spoken of their own hard months began to. A warehouse lead whose boy needed braces, a driver behind on a hospital bill of his own, a cook whose sister was sick 2 states away. The fund that had almost been emptied to nothing was, within a season, doing more than it had ever done in the years it sat quiet, because the near loss of it had reminded a whole company what it had been built for. Not one of them knew about a man and a broken pipe and a decision made at 2 a.m, but they were all, in a way none of them could have named, standing in the light of it. Adam learned it in pieces. the way he learned everything, without ceremony. Opal called him first, because she had asked his permission before she told Cora anything real, and he had given it slowly, and now she wanted him to hear the ending from a friend. The woman he had paid for was well. She was home. She was somebody's mother. That was all he had ever wanted to know, and it was more than he had let himself ask. Then, on a Saturday, there was a knock on the porch step that creaked, and he opened his door to the woman in the watercolored dress, except she was not in the dress, and she did not look like the toast of any city. She looked like a person who had not slept, holding nothing in her hands, which for a woman like her was its own kind of nakedness. "I have rehearsed an apology for a week," Cora said, "and every version of it is too small, so I'm going to skip it and tell you the true things instead." She took a breath. "My mother is alive because of you. I am the woman who mocked you in that restaurant. Both of those are mine to carry, and I did not come here to make you carry any of it with me." Adam stood in the doorway a long moment, the way he had stood in a hospital doorway 3 months before. "I didn't do it to be thanked," he said. "I did it so some kid somewhere still had a mother." He looked at her, and there was no cruelty in it, only a kind of tiredness that had a floor of peace under it. "Turns out you were the one doing the missing. That's enough." "That's more than enough, actually." "It shouldn't be," Cora said. "You should hate me." "I don't have the time or the room for it," Adam said, almost gently. "I've got a kid and a porch step to fix. Hate takes more than I can spare." Behind him, a small voice said, "Dad, who is it?" And then Bertie was at his hip, studying the stranger with the frank appraisal that only children and cats can manage. Cora braced for it. She felt she had earned whatever the girl decided. Bertie looked at her mother's murderer, so to speak, the woman who had laughed at her father on her birthday, and Bertie did not know any of that. And children forgive with a completeness adults lose. She only saw a tired lady on the step who her dad had not sent away. "We have cupcakes," Bertie announced. "From my birthday. There's one left, and it's a little bit smushed, but it's still good. Do you want the smushed one?" And Cora Halstead, who had built an empire and never once been undone by anything, was undone entirely by the offer of a smushed cupcake. And she said yes, thank you, she would like that very much, and she meant it more than she had meant anything in years. The debt was gone, and Adam did not celebrate it loudly, because that was not in him. He got the letter that said the claim had been fraudulent and was voided, and he read it twice, and then he went out to the porch and fixed the step that had creaked for 2 years, because now that he was going to keep the house, he wanted the house to be right. Bertie handed him nails. That was the whole of his victory lap. He would not take a reward, and Cora was wise enough by then not to offer one because she finally understood that the fastest way to insult this man was to try to pay him. What she offered instead was smaller and harder and better. She kept showing up. Not as a rescuer and not as a penance, but as a person, on ordinary days, learning the difference between the two, which was a thing she had never been taught. Weeks later, there was a table again in the same restaurant, and the arrangement of it had rearranged completely. Cora was across from him now, and Nina, who had been given a raise and an apology in the same week, kept finding reasons to pass their table and beam. Marguerite was there too, at last well enough to insist on it, and she had spent the whole meal holding Adam's hand across the cloth more than she ate. "You gave me back my daughter's mother," Marguerite said to him, which was a tangle, and then she untangled it. "You gave my daughter back her mother. You gave my grandchild a grandmother. Sit down, young man. You are a family now, and there is no vote on it and no appeal." Bertie, seated between the two women as though she had appointed herself the bridge, informed Marguerite very seriously that her father made pancakes shaped like a dog, and Marguerite said that she would simply have to see this famous dog for herself, and it was settled between them, over nobody's objection, that there would be a Tuesday soon, and that Marguerite would be at it, and that this was now a plain fact of the world with a place laid for it. Adam watched the three of them talk over one another and did not say much, because some tables a man is meant to sit at quietly and be glad, and let the noise wash over him like weather he had waited a long time to feel. When the check came, Cora reached for it, and she left the tip, and it was not small. And she did it quietly, without letting it carry, without letting the room enjoy it with her, the way a man near a kitchen door had taught her to do a season before, without either of them knowing a lesson was being given. Adam watched her do it and said nothing, and something in his chest that had been closed for 3 years came unlatched, just a little, just enough to let some light in, and he let it. He was not looking for it. Neither of them had been. But that is a different ending, and this one ends where it should, at home, late, in a kitchen with good morning light waiting in the dark for a morning that would come. It was a Tuesday, or near enough, and there were pancakes shaped like nothing on earth, and Bertie fell asleep against his arm before she finished hers, the way she still could at 8 and would not be able to much longer. On the windowsill was a photograph of a woman buying the wrong paint and refusing to be told, and inside the cupboard where only he ever looked, taped to the door beside the coffee mugs, was a folded hospital form with a blank line where a donor's name should have gone, and on that line, in a retired teacher's careful hand, 2 letters. S.S. A room full of strangers had once counted his tip and found it small. They had been counting the wrong thing. What a man sets down on a table has never once been the measure of what he carried to it. He never told anyone, he never needed to. The form in the cupboard knew, and the woman in the photograph knew, and the girl asleep on his arm would grow up knowing, too, without ever being told, the way children learn the truest things. He closed the cupboard on the 2 letters, and he carried his daughter to bed, and he turned off the kitchen light, and the narrow house, safe now, held steady in the dark.